Hey everyone, we're recording live and welcome to Employee Engagement 2.0. I have to start with a confession that I thought that I had arranged this for tomorrow at 3 o'clock and not today. So apologies to our three guests, which I'll introduce you to in a second, for taking last minute calls from me, basically going, oh, SHIT, can you do 3 o'clock? So I know you've all seen the description, but I'm just going to read out, just to recap on my phone what we're covering today, which is we're going to be looking at employee engagement, but from a new perspective. And I've got three experts with me today to help me do that. And before I go into a little bit of data to give a bit of context, it'd be great to get them to introduce themselves. Lisa, would you like to kick off with your intro?
Yes, bear in mind we've had 13 minutes to do this. Obviously I've worked in HR for nearly 30 years. Don't work out how old I am, please. And very passionate about culture and engagement and the value it brings to an organisation. And sometimes feel like you're pushing water up a hill, trying to convince those who don't get it to get it. So forever fighting that fight, and obviously really interested to see what I'm going to learn today as well. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And
also Lisa's hate me for doing this, but Lisa's last contract has just finished. So if you're looking for an awesome HR person, definitely get in touch with Lisa. And I know Kevin O'Brien's on here, so he'll probably want to have a chat, but I'll let the mingling happen later. Okay. Lisa's going to hate me, she's going to kill me for that afterwards. Heidi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Heidi Asbury. I'm the head of happiness for a company called Vocovo. It's great to be here. Bit of a surprise at 3 o'clock to to be joining the call, but it's great to see you all. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Heidi. And Clive?
Hi, yeah, I'm Clive Hyland. I act as the advisor on neuroscience for the Happiness Index, and fundamentally I've got about 30 years business experience and about 10 years of HR stuff as well. So I'll throw in the neuroscience angle when we get to it.
And also on Clive, one of the things that Lisa and I talk privately a lot about is the route from HR to CEO. And Clive is actually one of those rare people who actually took the HR to CEO route. So I think there's another session in that, Clive, at some point as well, isn't there?
Another one?
Also, another apologies, like Mark Thompson, who's also on here, 90% of my content is dad jokes, and because I can't see everyone's faces, I'll just assume that you're laughing at my jokes throughout.
We're still laughing at the hair, so throw in any jokes you like.
Yeah, very good, very good. I deserve that for giving people such short notice. Okay, so just a bit of context with a bit of data. So as many of you will know, a couple of weeks ago, we made one of our products available for anyone to use for free because we felt we needed to do our bit in this crisis. About 100 customers have signed up, which if they use it on all their employees will be about 1 million employees. Some companies, as an example, have got like 13,000 employees on furlough that they're checking in on. But I just wanted to recap. You probably saw the recap last week, which showed that employee happiness dropped from 7.6 to 5.8, which is a big drop. But one of the interesting things that came out is that the amount employees were feeding back had trebled. And we had a bit of a session about that to try and understand why that could be. And one of the things that we've been talking about is an emotional deficit. So what you can see often is that because all of a sudden in coronavirus, people suddenly didn't have their friends to see or their parents to speak to, we hypothesized that there was an emotional deficit there, that companies could potentially fill that, which is why in the positive things, we're seeing things like colleagues and team coming up, which we don't normally see. So I just wanted to share a little bit on that. But our main advice continues to be don't pull up the drawbridge, which is don't shut comms down. Your employees need you communicating more than ever. So back to the session, which is how a greater understanding of neuroscience and happiness is revolutionising employee engagement. So I just want to take us through the first 3 points super quick, which is I would define employee engagement 1.0 as the original data set questions. I'd define employee engagement 1.5 where those were upgraded onto new technology. And I would say employee engagement 2.0 is a deeper understanding of what drives human beings on the latest technology, which I've got some experts to speak to here about. But Heidi, I just wanted to go to you first on happiness and performance. And I know you're one of the rare people like myself that have put happiness in their job title, which some people like and some people don't.
I didn't put it in, by the way. I applied for the job, so.
That's much better.
What does that say about you, Matt?
I think it just says I've got a really big ego. or I don't give a shit, I don't know. So this is just turned into a session of people taking a piss out of me, isn't it? It's good. So Heidi, what's your view on happiness and performance? Do they belong together? Do they not? What are you seeing on the front line?
So I really believe that they belong together, and I believe that any sort of performance and development conversations that you have in your organization, people should come out of them feeling happy and support. Maybe feeling happy is the wrong word, but feeling supported. So even if there's been a difficult message, you should come out feeling supported and knowing how to rectify that. So I've been involved in many situations before where I've come out of a performance conversation and something's not been going so right. And actually I've just felt like, I don't know, just felt like utterly devastated, or I've been really upset, or, and I don't think that is the way to have conversations. And I'm sure, Clive is very much tuned into this, but I believe that you can have performance conversations in a way that, the way that supports you and helps you to feel good and helps you to feel supported, even if something has gone wrong. And I think that can ultimately lead to happiness and feeling happy in the long term. Because we all know, feeling happy is subjective, and you can feel happy, especially in this current climate, you can feel happy 1 minute and then you're like, weeping in your coffee the next minute. So, I definitely believe that happiness and performance belong together. Whether happiness is the right word, I'm not sure. Maybe it's being supported that ultimately will lead to happiness. So maybe that's it.
Lisa, just to bring you in on this subject, you're really passionate about discussing the human side of an employee experience. Why are you so passionate about that bit of it? Hi, Lisa, can you hear us?
Sorry, it cut in. So I've come back to that. Sorry, say that again.
Lisa, I wanted to understand, we were talking about happiness and performance, but you're really passionate about the human side of employees and understanding them from a human perspective. Why are you so passionate about
that? Well, a number of reasons, but just going back to what your colleagues said about the relationship between happiness and performance, they, for me, are naturally correlated. Any business I've worked with, anybody I've spoken to, especially of late, all of their high performance teams, when you start to sort of scale that back and understand about, why they're high performing, there's a natural correlation around how happy they are at work. And yes, some people would use the word happiness in different contexts, but it's about how fulfilled you are at work, I would probably say. And I fully support that you can have a difficult conversation in a very positive way that helps people rather than hurts people. And I see so much of it's done so badly by people who just are poorly trained or just don't understand how to have a difficult conversation. But the same way as I actually am a big advocate of, before you get to the point where you're having a situation where you're sitting down with somebody saying about, actually, Lisa, you're not quite yourself and you're not doing what you should be doing. Before that even happens, then you should be close enough to your people and your teams and have such a great relationship with them that if somebody does start to display any behavioural differences, any performance differences, you're there when they start.
Hi, Lisa. I think you just broke out there. Clive, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Clive, whilst we wait for Lisa to come back on, one of the things that you talk about a lot is how emotions belong at work.
Yeah.
Could you talk about what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, traditional approaches to management have very much been built on the assumption that emotions don't belong in work. You leave them at the door, and the word professionalism in some way implies that you're not supposed to be emotional. But the reality is that we are emotionally driven human beings, that our emotions are much more powerful than our thoughts and operate a lot quicker in the brain. So it takes around about 80 milliseconds to register an emotion in the brain, whereas it takes 250 milliseconds to register a thought. So our thoughts are always in catch-up mode, trying to make sense of our emotions. So if we want to get back to the raw ingredients of what people bring to work, the essence of that is our emotions. It's the fuel that we bring. Now, what the thoughts do is they help us to channel that emotion. If we're in a state where we feel positive and committed, our bodies and our brains want to engage with a task that's in front of them. If we feel in a position where we're unsafe emotionally and we feel mistreated in some way, we go into a survival state, and that directly affects the physiology of the brain and the body and puts us in a position where we cannot perform beyond very limited levels. So, both the question about performance and happiness are totally related. I get the issue with the word happiness because I think it conjures up images of somebody smiley, smiley and bouncy, bouncy. And actually, ultimate performance is more about being calm and feeling safe and feeling totally focused on what you want to do. Happiness is cool as a high energy state, but it's not sustainable. So even the understanding of the word happiness needs to be broken down into these high arousal and lower arousal states. I don't want to get too scientific about this, but if you get what I mean. But absolutely, there's no doubt about the fact that a body that's unhappy is not in a position to perform.
Lisa, whilst you popped out, we were building on your point on training and poorly trained managers, because I was asking Clive, do emotions belong at work? And it was obviously a leading question because I know Clive believes that. Lisa, do you believe that there's a lack of training in understanding human behaviour within senior leadership?
Oh, for sure, 1,000%. And I think there's a perception just because somebody's a CAO, they are good at communicating, they are good with people, or they are, good with any kind of management. They have been brilliant at what they've done. And usually, if you look at where they've come from operations, finance, or sales. And they've been promoted through the ranks because of their delivery, but it doesn't mean, we see it time and time again where people are promoted because they're good at what they do. It doesn't mean by they then go and get a team of 10 people and become a people expert overnight. Managing people is difficult. It's a very complex area, and I don't think people quite understand how complex it is until they start to do it. And I think it's kind of one of those, a bit like HR. It's a given that you should know how to handle and look after and support and develop people. Of course, people don't know how to do that. They have to be shown and taught, and it's something that evolves over time with maturity and wisdom. And so I think there's always going to be that conflict of that. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of gaps in leadership, and also perception that because you're a leader that you're naturally a good people person, and that's not always the case, and hence the reason why the most brilliant people in the world need support. Everybody does, and everybody's an expert in their own right. So use the expertise. Put yourself with people who know what they're doing. Don't assume that you know everything when you don't. You're not supposed to know everything. You don't need to either, not to run a successful business.
No, that's good because I'm rubbish at most things. Elle, I think your microphone isn't muted. I think we can hear your jumper coming over people. Heidi, in terms of happiness, and you obviously that is your role. Do you ever have challenges of getting people to understand why that's important within a business commercial perspective?
Yes and no. So I'm pretty lucky in the respect that I work for an organization that hired a head of happiness, and so they are committed to wanting people to be happy and engaged at work, and in fact that's our people strategy. That's the top line of our people strategy is, they want people to be happy and engaged at work. However, sometimes what I do see is I'm there often to put that reminder, to put a stick in, to be like, actually, this is all very good business focused thinking, but we need to remember to think about the people. What impact is this going to have on our people? So I feel very lucky in the respect that that I work for a company that does really care for its employees, and I think I feel massively lucky to do that, to work there. So
this might sound like a silly question, but how long is the entire people statement?
It's about it's probably about 6 lines, something like that.
Yeah.
The
reason I ask, Heidi, is sometimes some of the people we work with in the HR profession find it really difficult to simplify stuff down to such simple statements. Before I go back to Clive, have either you or Lisa got any thoughts on how you can do that?
So I think we started off with something really long. And we sort of like brainstormed, and we had a meeting whereby we all thought about all the things that we wanted to have in our company, and then we got it into something very succinct, and just got it into, I think it's just like 6 lines, something like that. It's like happy and engaged, come to work to do the best work of your career and feel supported, motivated and engaged, something like that. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but just some really simple positive statements of how we want our employees to feel and be treated at work. So
Lisa, have you got any advice on that, on how you keep a statement or questions or something like that, and keep it human so it doesn't become overcomplicated?
A bit similar to Heidi, actually. We called it the employee charter. So it was a very visible commitment from the company to the employees, and vice versa. That again, it wasn't led by the leadership per se. We went to the people and said, okay, we can build whatever you need. What do you want to be? Who are we going to be? Why are we going to be it? And we didn't ask the business to decide what it wanted to be. We asked the people, who do we want to be? And we built it. And although that took extra time, because of course you were then engaging, this example I'm giving you was 400 people, it made sense, because then it was done in most authentic way, and then made sense to people, and they bought into it because they'd helped to write it, and then it was everywhere. So very, very heavily branded, but again, written simple, everyday terms that people understood it. There were physical actions on the back end of what we were saying, so people could attribute them to everyday behaviours. So it then, after it was integrated, it stopped being something extra that you had to do, and became very integrated of who we are and who we were. And then that by itself was self-professing, and it went very well, very successful.
I really like that approach, Lisa. I really like that. Cool. I think I'd definitely like to do more of that. Definitely more of that collective sort of understanding of where people want to go, and I guess even that takes a bit of. I always feel like leadership always want to have like a bit of control. Sometimes when you're doing stuff from a bottom-up perspective, actually what you need the top to do is really to relinquish some of that control, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And there's always the conversation of, we can, 10 of us on the board can build this, what you want. But at the end of the day, for people to deliver what you need them to deliver, and that's why we're here. We're all here to make a profit. Let's call it what it is. But to do that, we have to have the best talent. We have to look after them. We have to nurture. No different than if you went and bought a very expensive house. You would look after it. You would decorate it. You would do all the things to keep it up. It should be no different approach when it comes to people. And so it's the same, where you have to invest in people as you would do anything that is of value to you. And in this perspective, obviously, the difference is people. So it wasn't too much for me personally to actually sell it upstairs, to sort of say, okay, well, yes, we can decide between us, but actually for our people to be the best people and actually be different and be our USP and be our competitors, they are the reason we will. So let's thinking what we know what people want when we don't. Let's go ask our people. Yeah. And yes, there will be some things they come back and they'll say, yeah, that's never going to happen. You're dreaming, love. Absolutely fine with that. I knew I would always go with 10 and hope victory out of my fight. And we built it slowly, and it progressed over time. So it wasn't a quick flip switch. But again, it's about the understanding the mentality, but also saying to the leadership team that let me take some pressure off of you guys. You know, you're building, you're selling, you're doing whatever technically to do with your business. Focus on that side of your business. And people, like anybody who's related to any kind of people function, we will bring your people to you ready to rock and roll, delivering over and above, not because you've asked, but because they want to, because they're fully bought in. So, and the combination between the two is something, you know, that you can build that's extraordinary, and will always fare you in good time, even tough times like now. The companies that are doing very well are the people that are looking after their people, even those who've been furloughed. You know, their reputation is that we'll come back.
We've lost her.
To keep that, you know, to keep that front of mind. It happened again, if you go back in time, being an old bird, 2008 when the market crashed. It's very different. You know, the biggest success stories that fared through it were those who actually recognised the value of their people, as well as understanding their business, and then maybe had to change. Things like fintech were born from the crash in 2008. They were the phoenix out the flames from that perspective. And so again, innovation will be reborn. There's lots of things that will be reborn, but none of that will be successful if you don't engage your people to do it. Hence the reason why I'm so passionate about the actual topic of why bother. Because
and people always remember what you do in a crisis, don't they? You know, they'll remember like those extra steps that you took.
Yeah. And you know, people always talk to other people, which is great. Networks and everything are amazing. So if you've been treated poorly, somebody's going to know about it somewhere. That does affect your brand, and it will also stop you having, maybe not now, but maybe in a year's time, stop you getting the best talent, because somebody said, well, actually, I heard dreadful things about them. They don't care about their people. And it just, you know, it stops you being the employer of choice, and being the employer that everybody runs away from. So that's not good for anybody's brand. I don't care how big a name you are. That's just foolish work.
And I think there's two big pieces in there from both your conversations. One, the investment time it takes to do it that way round, but it being worth that on the other side. Because even in this virtual world, it's taken me longer to get round to speak to everyone individually, but I know it's been worth it. Whereas you could have just done it in group stuff, but you get that one-on-one time. And also on Lisa's point around people speak, it's even easier to speak now, isn't it? People are on WhatsApp, they're sharing stuff. Lots of people don't like Glassdoor for various reasons, but it has brought a level of transparency that wasn't available before. I just want to bring you in on going back to the main theme here of employee engagement 2.0. One of the definitions that we say is around real-time data, which is people like Lisa and Heidi pick that up because they're professionals. They're picking up real-time data when they're in face-to-face conversations with people. And we talk about real-time data collecting from a technology perspective. But you also talk about how, because sometimes we get questioned, because some of our questions that we use at the Happiness Index have gone through a neuroscience filter. So we're trying to understand it through that. So sometimes someone look at a question like employee voice where it says, how are you feeling? And someone will say, well, that's not a very academic question, or that's not a very rational question. But Clive, you've helped us structure stuff so that we can understand why feelings are actually more real time. Could you just talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's building on the previous comment where I said our thoughts are slower than our emotions, and that's nothing controversial in the neuroscience world. We understand that quite clearly. So basically what it means is if your questions are over-rational, you're asking people to tell you their story of how they're coping, and it doesn't get you to the source of the data. So an example could be, how do you feel? Somebody could answer, well, I'm struggling, but I'm okay. That tells you nothing. So we want to get to the point where we want to understand what type of feelings are they experiencing and where are they in that process. So it could be feelings of anger, frustration, sadness, etc., because that's what they're trying to deal with themselves. Now, and this links to the point that Lisa was talking about around feedback, because it's not only that people struggle to deliver feedback, they also struggle to receive it because we are hung up on our own stories. The way that we make sense of our emotions is we tell ourselves stories and we try to keep that together in some way. So what it means is in many cases, we get into a state of denial or non-recognition of what it is that we're trying to actually deal with. So we're trying to go back to absolute source data. People themselves are dealing with their instincts and their emotions. That's the first part of the body experience, and the thoughts come in later. So if we can try to understand what they're dealing with themselves, then collectively we can try to work out what's the best way of dealing with things. So for instance, if you've got a morale problem in an organization, you need to be able to pin down, so what is that? Is that about trust? Is it about fear? Is it about uncertainty, misunderstanding? And when we've got to the right starting point, we can start rebuilding. We're over rational in our questions. There's plenty of time for the rational questions. When we come out of the emotional piece and we want to start agreeing what we do to move forward. But the starting point is, what is the essential currency of human performance? That is emotion.
Clive, that's so useful. And I just want to bring us on to the next bit around the sort of traditional change curve. And Clive, I'd like you to introduce sort of your thoughts on how it needs a bit of an upgrade from the traditional stuff. And then I'd like Lisa and Heidi to just feed in with what they're seeing on the ground on that side. So if you could just give us your concept on that, on what we were talking around enforced change, and I'll bring the guys in on that.
Okay, cool. So we're referring to the Kubler-Ross Curve, and I think most people are aware of that. And it's the fact that it stood the testimony of all this time and we're still discussing it is brilliant. So I'm not, diminishing it in any way. But what we can do is give that a neuroscience flavor, which, as you know, you and I have done. And it means that we can bring it into modern understanding, take advantage of new knowledge that we have. So that then enables us to understand the phases that people are moving through. So typically our reactions go from instinctive to emotional to reflective to rational. And they're all different systems that operate within the brain. So one of the key differences, for instance, is often you'll see the Kubler-Ross curve finish on a high. That's not appropriate because a high state of energy, in that sense, being excited is not sustainable. And if we're too excited, we have to come down. And that means there's volatility in performance. There's nothing wrong in those emotional peaks of being excited because we need those bursts. But equally, what we have to have is sustainable energy, which is much more about calmness. You think of top performers, they don't go out onto the running track, or onto the cricket field or footballing field being overexcited. The whole point is they know what to do, the body knows how to do it, and it wants to focus all the energy available to it on that cause. And that's what we're trying to achieve in high performance. So but when enforced changes come along, like COVID-19, and people are taken out of their normal familiarity and comfort zone, we now understand the type of emotional journey they're going to have to go through. So where the change curve is extremely useful is to enable us to plot where are they on that journey. Because there's no way of bucking it, you're going to have to go through it. Some will go through quicker than others, for some it'll be more extreme than others. But that's the curve that we have to go through so the body can rebalance to a new environment. So hopefully that gives you some sort of context.
Yeah, so Heidi and Lisa, the question I had for you is, if Clive set the point there that through COVID-19, let's say you've got 1,000 employees, that all your employees might be at different stages of going through that change curve. Possibly some are in panic, some people have moved through it quickly. Have you got any advice on how, if you're leading a team, how you deal with people who are in different stages of going through that change?
Do you want me to go first, Lisa, or do you want to?
Oh, no, finally go.
So I think it's really difficult, but I think one of the key points for me is about dehumanizing yourself and how you're feeling. So I think one of the things that we've tried to do is to, for example, like I'm trying to work, my child comes in, has a conversation to talk to Rosie, Lucy, whoever, trying to say how I'm feeling. So today, I'm feeling good today. Yesterday I had a really bad day. Today I feel like I just want to cry all over the news. I think, sharing what you're going through helps others to share what they're going through as well. And I think having a team at all different levels, I think, it's just natural, isn't it? It's just what happens in life. So I think just by humanizing what's going on for you and, making yourself vulnerable and showing your feelings, I think others will follow suit.
I'm going to come back to that. I want to hear Lisa's point on it, but I want to just come back to that, Heidi.
Yeah, so if you use the example where you say 1,000 people, whilst, Heidi's point is absolutely right, you'll have different people at different stages, but it's not like you could group them up. It's not like we could give them a survey and say, okay, well, you're at this point, and so we speak to you 15 about that, and the 20 at this level, so we speak to. So it is going to have to be a much more collaborative. The biggest thing is accepting that it's real. And people, if you look at people behavior right now, and I think that there's a lot of thought around this will be very short-lived, and I think that's naive. And I think the mental health pressures on everybody right now through going through what I call almost like a grieving process of things that people have lost versus, which is obviously tucked in with the curve, but is such variable. And like you say, that there's no 2 days the same. There's no prescription for this. This has never been done before. So we shouldn't go to a textbook and think what we should do next, because we have to think about it very carefully and sensitively, because this has not happened before. So we can't all make out we're experts and know all the answers right now, because we shouldn't do. But it is about making sure that people, we have enough people around those people to support them, to have open and honest conversations, to have sort of group meetings or one-to-one for those who are struggling. There's a lot of people I know right now who I personally thought were very consistent in everything they do. And if I look at them now, the only way to describe them is 40% of the people I know have turned into bipolar. And Clive, there's a very good point about you talking about the extremes of, yes, you can come out and be excited and be on a high curve. It's not sustainable, because people are crashing and burning. They're doing that. They're taking actions because that's what we're all sort of taught to do as a good thing, as a process. To when you've got an acceptance, you take some actions and they're positive, and that sort of takes you out of the lull. But they are short-lived, and people need to recognize that it's okay to not know everything right now, and it's okay to not have the answers right now. And we're just going to have to spend more time supporting people through this journey. And I think it's going to be a little bit longer than people realize.
Can I just build on that a little bit? Because, in no way was I trying to say that, we need to have the answers at every stage. The key thing is to understand where people are. And that's, of course,
absolutely. But yeah.
And that's
but a lot of people come to HR, don't they? And they expect you to have all the answers. Yeah.
But that's where the data recording comes in. Is so important, because we can understand with confidence the general principles of the journey, but that doesn't mean to say we know individual answers, because every individual is different. So it acts as a map for us rather than as a textbook or a manual, and that can be applied very, very usefully. And the implication of what you say is, like, the important thing is to acknowledge it, because people are so nervous about expressing their emotions. You can't turn up in a traditional organization and say, I'm having a bad day. But actually, you should be able to. That's exactly what you should be able to say. The fact
I feel like that's what I've been doing recently.
Sorry?
I feel like that's what I've been doing recently, to help others to be able to say, I'm having a bad day.
Yeah, precisely, because what happens, if you don't do that, you internalize the emotion, and that takes you further into survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, it directly affects the way that the brain and body operates. And it means you cannot engage properly when you're in survival mode. You are internally fighting for your life. And this is the science that backs up. A lot of the comments today are intuitive, and that doesn't make them wrong. It's absolutely appropriate that we stick the intuitive and the science together and make sense of both. And that's what we're trying to do.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I find like a lot of, even like using this software, the employee voice software, and it's like, we want you to share our feelings, but, I've been talking to quite a few sort of like HR colleagues, and they're like, well, they're saying share your feelings. It's okay to feel like this, but actually a lot of the leaders are not sharing their feelings as well. And I think it's really valuable. It's really valuable to share it.
And it takes time to demonstrate, and build trust to get to a point where people can say, yes, I think I can share my feelings. So you can't suddenly switch it on overnight, but you can start doing something about it.
Yeah, a friend of mine has just started at American Express last week, and I just messaged her after a week and said, how's it going? She was like, you know what, we had this great town hall with the CEO who told us a load of stuff, but he also told us loads of stuff that he didn't know. And she was like, thought it was so nice to hear him just say, not be a CEO that felt like I had to give all the answers. Because there is stuff that lots of us don't know. And I just found it significant that was the bit that she picked out. So Heidi sort of predicted my next question.
Sorry.
That's totally good. Which I think I'm going to go to Lisa first because I think she's got a very good way of doing this from the way I read her stuff, which is Heidi used a point earlier around like humanizing stuff, but Lisa, how do we communicate? Like, you talk about training. Clive's talking about some stuff that people may have never heard before. To some people in CEO roles, what we're talking about is fresh stuff. How do you get us? Because when we're recording this, a lot of people who will listen won't be as experienced as the people that are talking here. How do you take CEOs on the journey to understand this stuff?
Again, if I talk just from my position, it's about making sure that my influencer skills are probably the most important right now. Now, like I say, I write some posts and I'm known for being a little bit sassy, and that's okay. I pride myself on making a different noise because we have to have those difficult conversations, and it comes back to courage. Regardless of who you are within the business, okay, everybody, in my eyes, and this might sound a little bit romantic to some, but everybody has a part to play. The business is made up like a jigsaw, and everybody's just as important. It makes no difference to me if you're the CEO or the cleaner, absolutely none whatsoever. Everybody should be given the same, treated with respect, inclusion, all of the support makes no difference whatsoever. But having the courage, say from somebody who'd been in the company for a couple of weeks, maybe just a new joiner who's a receptionist, to then go and have the courageous conversation with the CEO saying, well, actually, I see everybody every day. They come in and they speak to me. And actually, she's a great source of knowledge of what's going on in your business because she hears it first, just as much as the people who have a cigarette hear it first. And they're all good people that collect great information and great communication from different sources that is genuine and real, but they're probably not courageous enough to then say, actually, no, Matt, I don't really know if this is my place to say this, but I've been hearing these things and we could do some good stuff. But again, that builds back to building a great culture that people feel that they can.
Yeah.
And again, come back to Clive's point, it's not an overnight thing, that is a slow burner, but it's about giving people a safe space to be able to have a voice.
Yeah.
And then you listening to the voice and actually taking actions on the back end of it. Otherwise, it's just hot air and bullshit, and who wants that?
Lisa, you'll love this, but Clive and I did a half-day workshop with a digital marketing agency called Rebel, and they spent they basically spent the whole afternoon. We spent the whole afternoon with them around what their vision was going to be, Clive. And can you remember what the two words they came out with were?
With Rebel, not top of head. Was it the conversations one?
It was brave. It was an extension. It was brave conversations. So they said that that's what they wanted their culture to be about, is that everyone can have brave conversations internally and externally. So you could also have it with a client. You could go to Primark and you could say, look, guys, and if a 9/11 event happens and you don't have a digital marketing website, your business is going to go from earning 600 million a month to zero, which is a conversation that obviously was not achieved with Primark, which is why they are absolutely struggling at the moment. And guess what? The people who are going to be struggling the most will be the employees if they end up being made redundant. So Clive, on the summary point, I'm going to go to you and then Heidi. Clive, you went through the HR through to CEO route. Is there anything you on that same theme of helping a CEO understand, having been in the HR and then into the CEO, is there anything you took from that route into being CEO that helped you do that role?
Well, I was, there are different types of CEOs. There are some that come from a marketing background, some from a finance background, and I always came from a understanding of people background. I did a lot of sport and things like that, and to me it was always about how do you get the best out of your people. So I think we also have to be fair to CEOs. We're using the term very generally. Having been in that slot, actually you are expected to have all the answers. And that's part of the problem, is the pressure those guys and ladies are under themselves. They're expected to perform in a certain way. So this runs all the way through to shareholder expectations. And I totally agree with Lisa's comment about, that the paradigm is effectively changing here, because at the top should not be about being in control and not having all the answers. It should be about creating the environments in which people can give all their best. And certainly most of those higher environments that currently exist around hierarchy, rules and processes They're overly rational. They're ignoring the emotional beings that we are. And we need to recreate communities within businesses that feel committed to a common cause. That's when you'll get the best out of people. And that's when teams can perform to a high capability because they want to, and they want to be part of that team, and they want to give their best. Because we are designed ultimately to perform and give our best. It's the organizational barriers that we put in the way that stop us doing that.
Just to touch on the happiness index, one thing we don't talk about too much is we actually have 3 CEOs in the happiness index. We went through that conversation with Clive in one of our sessions. And it's quite funny because sometimes you speak to investors and they say, well, what's the structure? And you say you've got 3 CEOs. They look at you and they're like, whoa, and you can see them internally having a problem with it. But I just know straight away that it's a waste of time. They're never going to get what we're trying to achieve. But it made, even when Boris Johnson was ill the other day and everyone was saying, oh my God, what are they going to do? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Even at its basic level, when someone's ill, like one of my co-CEOs was with COVID, it wasn't a problem because there was enough 2 CEOs. Also, just before we move on, one of the values of the happiness index, you should never have to choose between your family and your career. And Kevin, I think that's the youngest person we've seen on this webinar. Would you like to introduce that?
Hello.
Hello, everyone. This is Grace.
Hi, Grace.
And the only way I could shut her up was to sit her on my knee.
Oh, no, it's lovely to see her. Yeah, she's gorgeous.
After all.
Hello, Grace.
Right, she'll stay here. That's okay.
That's
totally of course.
So, Heidi, you got to follow that now.
I forgot the question. I think you were talking about CEOs, but
we're talking about how on the HR and employee engagement, how we support the CEO and communicate with them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit different for me because I've got an incredibly emotionally intelligent CEO, and so I'm really lucky in the respect that that he's really into engagement and people, and wanting people to be able to come to work and do do the best work of their career. So I'm feeling incredibly blessed. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to give any advice on this. Sorry.
Well, there's some good advice there, isn't it? Work for a CEO that's emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
So, guys, we're already 3 minutes overdue. So, I'm just one last question with you, which I should have asked at the beginning, and then we'll finish up. Who should we go? Lisa, do you want to go first? What makes you happy, Lisa?
What makes me happy is making other people happy. Sounds a bit naive, really, but I just see my path in life is to educate the CEOs who aren't emotionally intelligent, to see the brilliance of the people they've got, and to take their businesses into another level if they could just see it differently and trust others. So I just that's my quest, and I will, keep going one company at a time until they all are as passionate about it as I am.
Love that, Lisa. Clive, what makes you happy?
2 words: learning and loving.
Oh, brilliant. Succinct, love it. Heidi?
I just love talking to people. Like, I love positive interactions with people. That makes me happy. I'm always buzzing if I've had some good conversations with people. So
brilliant. So, guys, I'll just finish up by saying to Lisa, Heidi, and Clive, thank you so much for giving up your time. Sorry for the late notice. We'll share the recording of this. I've seen a few questions flash up as we've gone, and Rosie will just send everyone a note of the recording, and we'll answer any questions in there. And if you've got questions for any of the speakers, send them in to us, and we'll direct them on to them. And final note: Lisa's contract is finishing, so hire her.
And you're right. Yes, I'm going to kill you when you hang from this.
Hi, Grace.
But you have answered the question. What makes you happy? Matt?
You've turned the question into the questioning. Mine's always the same, which is independence. So if it's, it doesn't matter whether it's with my partner or with my children or where I work, as long as I feel I can be independent in a relationship, then I'm happy. If I feel restricted, then I just go and do something else. So that applies to everything, which is I think why I was a big believer in the happiness index vision, which is freedom to be human.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Take
lot.
care.
Bye.
Be safe.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.